I was born in 2002. By most definitions that you find online on who belongs into which generation, this places me into Generation Z. It's the answer that I would give if I were asked which generation I belong to. My childhood was defined by growing up and being a young kid and making my earliest memories in the early 2000s, and my formative years being in the 2010s, with my high school graduation and entering into adulthood happening in the year 2020. Now, I know the jokes that they tell about the class of 2020 and how we didn't get a real graduation, but me living in suburban Texas at the time, I actually did. They just put all the seats 6 feet apart on our comically large football field, but I get how annoying it could be hearing it from all the people who didn't. I like to think that most people who consider themselves to be Gen Z in this country have similar experiences to me and grew up with the same things that I did, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case. Who is Generation Z? Well, when were we born? The general consensus is the boundary being from 1997 to 2012. Now, I see a glaring problem with this. This puts people who were young kids when 9/11 happened and had already graduated college when COVID hit in the same generation as kids who were in middle school when COVID hit and think of 9/11 as practically being ancient history. People who were directly affected by the 2008 financial crisis in the same generation as people who grew up or were even born after the economy had already turned itself back around. Are these people really members of the same generation? Both someone who was born in the late 90s and someone who was born in the early 2010s might both call themselves Gen Z, but what do they really have in common with each other? Now, being born in 2002 is such an odd thing because I grew up right at the time that things were rapidly changing from the ways of the 90s into this new, fascinating technological future that the 21st century promised us. When I was a kid, the future and the technological advances we were making did actually seem exciting. And it took up until about when I reached adulthood that things really started to feel off. I grew up with a landline phone in the house, but I remember when the iPhone first came out and being amazed at how much could be done on it. I grew up watching pretty much every movie at home on DVD and recorded episodes of shows to DVR to watch them later. I even remember when Netflix was a DVD rental service rather than an online streaming platform. And I remember the flash in the pan known as Redbox, and when the first one showed up outside our local grocery store. I grew up with a shared family computer, and my brother and I would look up YouTube videos like the Duck Song when I was a little kid. I remember when the internet wasn't ubiquitous and just felt like one of many fun things to do along with going to the park and going to the movie theater. I grew up with most of the stuff millennials remember fondly from their childhoods and think that we didn't have, when in reality they started changing during my childhood. One of the most annoying things to someone who's Gen Z is hearing about what older generations think our lives are like, or forgetting how old a lot of us actually are and when we grew up. Baby boomers who think that we never played outside, Gen Xers who think we don't know what VHSs and CD players are, and most bafflingly, some millennials think we don't remember 2010s pop music. Like, I vividly remember Gangnam Style, dude. I was 10. They still played it at school dances until I was in the 8th grade. The thing is that maybe this is stuff that younger Gen Zers actually don't relate with. And maybe the older generations have a point. The problem is, when they talk about Gen Z, they're also talking about me and getting it completely wrong. I couldn't have possibly been an iPad baby because the iPad didn't exist until I was 8. But they did exist when the youngest members of the supposed Generation Z were born. I was originally gonna make an argument that the true generational boundaries are getting smaller and that Gen Z really should only stretch until the mid-2000s, maybe 2008 at the latest. It makes sense to think like this because the world seems to be changing now faster than it did back during the time of the baby boomers, with advancing technology and new trends happening more frequently, causing more differences between people of similar ages. And maybe it is a defining characteristic of Gen Z that we are a fractured generation, that we have less in common with those of our own generation than previous generations did with their own generations. With the ubiquity of the internet and the hyper-personalization of everyone's own algorithms, everyone is shoved down into the rabbit hole of their own interests. What makes them engage the most with what each app has discovered makes each person tick. But now I'm thinking, do generations really even matter, other than for like statistical purposes and stuff like that? I don't think it really matters what defines a generation, but more so that people of a similar age group in the same place are able to work together to form a future that we can use to benefit ourselves and our future generations. It seems more and more like we're living in a world that isn't made for us and is only built to cater previous generations who haven't had to struggle in the same ways that we have and are too selfish to try and understand what we're going through. This is why it's so stupid that we have this culture where someone who's 17 is calling someone who's 23 a washed unk just because they're a bit older than them. If we can't relate to each other, then how are we going to fix anything? I feel like it's up to the generation that grew up during the transition from exciting future to exhausting future to understand what's bad for us and how we can steer the future towards something better for us and those who come after us. I know for most people it seems like a bleak time to have kids right now, but I'm optimistic that even if our generation has kids later in life than previous generations, we will eventually be living in better times and be able to provide for our kids. And though I know some of you really don't want to hear this, and you've probably been told the exact opposite, but I think it's also important that we do have kids. Because without kids, there are no future adults. And without future adults, there is no future. Now, if you're Gen Z in the comments, please tell me some of your favorite things that you grew up with. And anyone of other generations watching, feel free to ask questions about our experience as members of Gen Z. And also, what do you think defines our generation? If you're interested in seeing more of this, please tell me in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe. And also, people who have been subscribed, I know that this is a different kind of video for me, but I want to move more into this kind of a direction with my channel and away from just talking about music. I'm still gonna be talking about music, of course, because that's kind of my thing, but I really want to do much more varied stuff on this channel. Also, on another note, my car got rear-ended a couple months ago. It has been fixed now, but my CD box, the box with all of my original CDs in it, was in the back of my car, but it survived. And if you want to help me out, you can buy my CD on Bandcamp. Link is in the description for $10. If you're into grunge and just heavy music in general, you'll probably like it. And you'll probably also like the rest of my music that I have out on streaming. So please support me there and support me here. And peace.